So, what's your perspective on why people in the United States are so unhealthy and so overweight?
Oh, wow. Well, it's because foods that are processed foods and most of the high concentrated caloric foods rush into the bloodstream very rapidly. They're very different from foods that were available 20,000 years ago, and they
Mhm.
become addicting, and it increases their desire to eat more extra calories, and and recreating with food becomes one of their primary purposes in life. So I'm saying right now is that because they're not eating natural things like fruits and vegetables and mushrooms and onions and berries, because they're eating predominantly processed foods and animal products, which are more calorically dense and rush into the bloodstream with a lot of concentrated calories at one time. And the high concentration of calories in the blood has stimulatory effects on the apostats in the central nervous system and the dopamine receptors that make you dopamine insensitive and feeling empty unless you continue to overly stimulate them. So then people really don't feel comfortable unless they overconsume calories, and they've disconnected the body's instinctual drive for calories. Instead, now they're driven to eat because of addictive relationships with food, but it's not really food because those foods are not really food. What I'm saying right now is like a bagel, a pizza, a burger, a croissant. Those are not really food because they act on the body more like a drug, because white flour converts into the bloodstream as sugar almost instantaneously. It's like you just ate a sugar cube. And the high spike of glucose in the blood, which then results in a huge surge of insulin, which is the primary fat storage hormone. And then the high level of insulin increases your hunger as well. And the high surge of glucose in the blood stimulates the same opiate centers in the brain that are overly stimulated by narcotics and cocaine. And because these processed foods and commercial baked goods have no significant micronutrient load, they're not a source of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and phytochemicals. They're just empty calories. And in order to convert glucose into energy, you need cofactors like vitamins and minerals, and then it produces free radicals. So to convert it into energy is difficult without those cofactors present, and the body has to strip itself of nutrient reserves in order to do so. So it's an inefficient converter into energy. It's more readily stored as fat, and so you're still feeling fatigued and unsatisfied, even though you're overconsuming calories. So I'm just starting to answer the question. It's a very complicated question as to why we have an obesity epidemic and everybody in America is overweight, whereas 10,000 years ago, there was no overweight people on the earth, and there's no overweight hyenas and, squirrels and chipmunks and deer. They're all the same weight, and they all have almost the same lifespan. And primitive humans all had the same weight and the same lifespan, other than accidents and things. But now we're suffering from these diseases, as you were saying, these diseases of predominantly of caloric excess and the wrong type of calories. We're eating a diet not well adapted to the design of the human species, and therefore we get disease. So I'm making this radical claim, which you're supporting, is that heart disease doesn't have to happen. Strokes does not have to happen. And even most of the cancers that afflict Americans don't have to occur and would not have occurred in human history. The first cancers that were recorded in the scientific literature were in the 14th century among chimney sweeps who first were noticing getting scrotal cancers and testicular cancers from being exposed to smoke. But there were no large amounts of people with colon cancer and breast cancer and prostate cancer. That didn't happen for hundreds of years later, when people were able to get more calories, build up body fat, have more animal fats and processed foods. It's this combination between the excess amount of animal products, which includes animal protein and saturated fat, and processed foods, which of course includes high glycemic carbohydrates and refined oils. And that combination of those, that dietary portfolio is very inflammatory promoting and disease promoting, and creates an untold amount of human tragedy. And people are so confused about nutrition. And while they're so confused, and while the whole American population is overweight, Americans are eating 2% of their diet from vegetables. 2%.
Wow. Wow. I didn't realize it was that low.
A primate. We're vegetable-dependent animals. Primates eating green. We eat 2%. So I always say, if you don't like vegetables, then you better live close to a hospital.
Right.
Not going to help you, but it's the point is, it's a joke, but the point is, you can't be normal. You can't expect normalcy with the percent of vegetables being so low in your diet.
I just had a very interesting conversation yesterday, unexpectedly. Just 6 months ago, I started a new job in rural Iowa after having worked in the Twin Cities for a couple of decades. And I was very pleasantly surprised. I wasn't expecting to encounter anybody that knew anything about plant-based nutrition. But actually, in the short time that I've been here, there's 2 doctors that are quite interested in it. And one of the doctors that I was talking to, it started out as just a conversation about screening calcium scores, with CT. And I was sort of of the mindset, well, there's really not much point unless people are going to radically change.
Right.
They're going to use the information to change their lifestyle, which led into a conversation about how he himself had moving towards a plant-based diet himself for the last 6 months and has lost 30 or 40 pounds. Recognize he still needs to lose a little bit of weight and has a little ways to go as far as his habits and so on. But I thought that was really encouraging in rural Iowa that this guy had this insight. But one of the things that he said was, well, really, the truth is my bread and butter are people that are doing everything wrong. They're smoking, they're drinking, they're eating the wrong foods, they're not exercising. And that's the bread and butter of his work. Anyways, he showed a lot of insight about how to sort of gauge the person that he's talking to and introduce the idea of plant-based nutrition, which I thought was very promising to see that a physician doing that. Not many are doing that, but the CDC says that 74% of the U.S. population is overweight, obese, but you use a statistic in the order of 90%. Why do you have such more stringent criteria on obesity?
Well, because obesity is with a BMI above 30, but they're saying overweight is with a BMI above 25. And I'm saying all long-lived societies and long-lived individuals, centenarians, have BMIs below 23, not below 25. So the optimal BMI for lifespan purposes for a male is below 22 and for a female is below 21. So if we permissively allow 23 to be the demarcation line between normal weight and overweight, then it classifies 89% of Americans as being overweight, not 75%. It's 89%. The National Institute of Health and the conventional health authorities are too permissive. You're still overweight if you have, and I'm saying that because we measure insulin levels, HSCRP, myeloperoxidase, oxidized LDL, we measure telomere length, right? We measure methylation defects. We can measure things that show your biological age. And we see that as a male's BMI, as a male's body fat goes above 15%, these numbers go out of whack. As a female's body fat goes above 25%, the numbers become abnormal. And I'm saying with inflammation, immune suppression, deactivation of gene silencing, we're all talking about gene silencing means the body can recognize and silence abnormal genes. It has the ability to recognize and repair gene defects. The body has the ability, the body has this miraculous self-healing capacity that is deactivated by excess calories and by excess body fat. So I'm suggesting that there's no such thing as a healthy overweight person, that all people that are overweight are unhealthy, even if they're not diabetic yet. Because even if they're not diabetic yet, their insulin is too high because fat on the body makes you insulin resistant. And the insulin resistance, then the beta cells in the pancreas have to produce more insulin to digest, to keep the sugars in the normal range. So even if the sugars are in the normal range, you still have high production of insulin, which puts you in my definition of diabetes in a pre-diabetic state, because that itself is accelerating atherosclerosis even before the glucose starts to rise. But I'm saying here that if you take the 11% of people in America with a BMI below 23, and we look at them, most of them are smokers, alcoholics, medical conditions like autoimmune conditions or depression. So most of them are normal weights because they're unhealthy. It's only 4% of Americans that have a favorable BMI because they exercise regularly and eat relatively healthfully, because they've done it through healthy diet and exercise. 2.4%. The rest of them are either overweight, because I'm saying if you're normal and you're eating like other Americans eat, then you're supposed to become overweight or something's wrong with you. So we can't look at the health or longevity of the normal weight people, because most of them should be overweight too if they were healthy.